Do you think that the president will potentially postpone the election, or do you think that these are just simple threats?
Well, I mean, he has threatened to postpone the election. Senior members of the American Congress had said that only the Constitution, only the legislature can delay or postpone the election day. There is a certain day in January where the president has to vacate the office. Nancy Pelosi said if he won't leave the White House if he loses, they should fumigate the White House. That should get him out. Look, the very fact that the president of the United States suggests that the election should be delayed is to signal to his followers not to believe the results in November. What he's trying to do is sort of immunize himself from the results. You know, if he takes a pounding, he'll say, you can't believe these results. We've had all these postal ballots. That is, millions of Americans will, instead of going to the polls and risk coronavirus, are going to be mailing. I mean, absentee ballots have always been there. And he's arguing that a lot of these names will be phony names, you know, sort of like branch stacking in Australia. You just go to the graveyard and you find some names and you crank them up again. So what he's telling his people is you can't believe the results. So what he's doing is he's kind of trashing the electoral vote on the way out the door. Does anyone take him seriously? Well, I think it's an important message. He tells the people in China, you know, we've criticized him this week for not holding legislative elections in Hong Kong, and yet he's saying, for the same reasons, we can't hold them because of the coronavirus. This is the same president who wants Americans to go to football and baseball games, to go shopping, and wants 7-year-old kids to go to school. At the same time, he said it's too dangerous to vote in November. Well, you can't have it both ways. But look, this is an unusual president, the 45th president. He's not your traditional type guy, and there's a lot about this about Donald Trump that suggests Houdini. He has a way of getting out of really tight spaces. So, but the fact that he has suggested it has already done the damage. The fact that he can't do it doesn't mean much, because what he's alerted his own people to is you can't trust the results on November 3rd, which I might add for your audience is only 95 days away.
Sooner than what we think. Well, it'll be interesting to see what else happens with that. Now, let's talk about the annual OSMIN meetings in Washington. Of course, this week we saw Australia and the US establish a defence cooperation framework to counter Chinese military aggression. In terms of this, do you think, Professor, that Australia has really declared itself ready for whatever eventuates?
Look, Danica, I've been in this country since February 1973, and I have studied Australian defense policy, and I got to meet a lot of the top people as the years went by. And at no time in my 45 years here has any Australian politician or minister ever sacrificed Australia's national security to lockstep with the United States. Everything Australia has done, whether it's been the Labor, the Liberal, or the Vegetarians, or anybody in between, has always been in Australia's interests. The fact that these two ministers went to Washington and deepened the involvement, and Australia has been locked into the ANZUS Treaty for a long time, and knowingly and willingly, they've gone to deepen this involvement. They've signed, I guess, a secret protocol or something. And it's all about how to deal with China, which is asserting itself in East and Southeast, the South China Sea and the East China Sea, and, of course, threatening Australia with pulling out its students, which could be a disaster for the universities because they don't know how to live without them, pulling out its investments, which would grow grass in Melbourne and Sydney. That's important, too, and threatening tourists. So, you know, the Chinese have a hold on Australia. At the same time, they haven't really delivered on much of this, because they don't want to be seen to going after individual nations. They try to push Australia around, and maybe some other people, just to get Australia to back off. But Australia is not backing off. The defense minister and the foreign minister have made it very clear to the Americans that they'll be going along with them. And I remember when I came here, I started to look at the rhetoric that Australians use. You know, it was, we'll go waltzing Matilda with you, or wherever you go, and LBJ all the way, and Robert Menzies will be with you through thick and thin. I mean, there's no doubting the enthusiasm of these Australian ministers. Now, the other thing, too, is that Australians have to understand is, for the past 15 years or so, the Australian armed forces are completely interoperable with the American forces. They use the same bullets, the same gauges, and all the rest of it. They're a fighting team together, and there's a great deal of momentum about that kind of thing. And in the last couple months, the government of the day has increased has improved the facilities, are going to improve the facilities at the base of Tyndall and American forces in Darwin. And from those Tyndall bases, these American fighter planes could take off with their cruise missiles and all the rest of it.
Yes.
And so Australia is getting at the pointy edge of things that China has to worry about. Is China a major threat? Yes. Is it a rising power? No, but it's a very desperate power. It's determined to force its will on South China Sea, and it may want to pick on Australia a little more. I can see if Australia is involved in freedom of navigation villages. Yes. I can see the Chinese shooting at Australian ships in there, and the Americans to come to their aid. Well, I think the Chinese will get that wrong.
Well, it'll be interesting to watch how that one pans out. But the rhetoric certainly from the US and Australia this week has been fascinating to watch. Just finally, Professor, there was once a time when we were talking about North Korea all the time, watching that very closely, and particularly the relationship between the US and North Korea. Now we haven't heard much about what's going on in the north, other than perhaps there may have been a coronavirus case in the last week or so. What is North Korea up to?
Well, aside from the fact they have finally located Chairman Kim, he was missing for a while. He doesn't look well, actually, in the pictures that we see. And he's made it very clear that North Korea, which up till now supposedly did not have the coronavirus, COVID-19, has been inflicted with a case brought in by a defector from South Korea, which is shorthand for North Korea saying to South Korea, despite the fact we've been bad-mouthing you for the last 6 months, we're going to need some assistance and aid from you. And also it's an important indication to Trump that Kim is looking for assistance. I would not put it past President Trump to have some kind of an arrangement with Kim in October, because American presidents love October surprises. I wouldn't be surprised if American aid comes to Kim's rescue on this COVID business, and that maybe there is some progress on the denuclearization talks. Now, there ain't going to be any denuclearization. What they're going to do is continue to cooperate in terms of not having any tests that are threatening the United States or its allies in the region. But I don't put it past Kim and Trump both, for their own domestic reasons, to do something dramatic in October, maybe meet somewhere. And don't imagine that Kim runs the whole show in North Korea. He's beholden to the military. If he gives Trump too much, he's going to put a bullet in his head anyway. But he is desperate. He has promised things he hasn't been able to deliver on. And I think the COVID thing is far more serious in North Korea than we know of. And, of course, in the past years, there have been famines there that we only barely saw. So when he says we're in trouble, he means we're in trouble.